Can you imagine a world on the brink of nuclear war between two superpowers, with the future of humanity hanging in the balance? The China War raised several questions. Is the politics of two nuclear-armed countries more significant than the peace of the world? The US-China War is one of the worst nightmares in this decade that the world can imagine after the COVID pandemic. But the current rising political tensions between these two superpowers has alarmed all. In today's video, we will discuss the rising tensions between the US and China, uncover the causes behind the conflict, and the far-reaching effects it could have on our world. To give a better understanding of this conflict, we will divide it into 4 parts, explaining the causes behind these political tensions, the impact on regional stability, the nuclear war possibility, and the economic consequences of the US-China war. What does the greatest war of the century hold? Will we see the consequences soon? All this and more to know, so watch till the end. But firstly, let's ask the question, will this change everything? Is it likely to believe we are all heading towards our doom? We can only know it by driving back in time to know the origins of the war. The US-China conflict started in the 1950s, when Chinese troops attacked some of Taiwan's outlying islands. American leaders warned about using nuclear weapons against China. This made China back down again. 70 years later, 2018, on August 2nd and 3rd, Nancy Pelosi, United States House of Representatives Speaker, visited Taiwan, setting off the country's 4th such crisis in the past 21 years. Since Newt Gingrich went there in 1997, Ms. Pelosi has been the highest-ranking American politician to tour the island that China still claims. This crisis has only begun, but threatens to usher in a new period of hostility between China and the United States. However, President Xi Jinping of China, which maintains claims on Taiwan, stated categorically in one of his addresses that the issue of Taiwan cannot be left unresolved from one generation to the next. His 2017 proclamation that reunification is necessary to achieve the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation was met with widespread criticism. However, Washington is bracing for the wrong kind of war. Many defense planners, including the Pentagon, are committed to winning a short conflict that stays within the Taiwan Strait. To accomplish this, it would be necessary to endure an early onslaught of missiles, foil a Chinese assault, and force Beijing to the bargaining table. The Chinese leadership appears to be preparing swift, crippling assaults to break Taiwanese resistance and present a fait accompli to the United States. Both sides would prefer a massive conflict in the Western Pacific, but they must make do with less dramatic fighting. The most worrisome possibility is that Beijing launched a surprise missile strike, devastating Taiwan's defenses and the American Navy and aviation forces centered on a few big sites in the Western Pacific. An adequate reaction from the United States or Taiwan would be hampered by simultaneous Chinese hacking and anti-satellite operations. The PLA would then quickly take advantage of this opening by launching air and seaborne attacks on Taiwan. The conflict may end before the United States is militarily prepared to enter it. The Pentagon is focusing more of its efforts on contingency preparation to avoid just such a situation. The plan aims to make it easier for the United States to sink an invasion armada from the People's Liberation Army and more complicated for the PLA to mount an assault. The United States wants Taiwan to deploy asymmetric weapons that can deal a heavy blow to Chinese invaders, such as road-mobile anti-ship missile systems, mines, and small missile-armed ships. The success or failure of a free Taiwan is expected to be decided in the first few weeks of combat, if not the first few days. However, the dispute's outcome is likely to be decided later. Since the Industrial Revolution, most conflicts between major powers have continued longer than anticipated. This is because current states can keep fighting despite suffering heavy casualties. If China suffered a crushing loss, its aviation and naval forces would be decimated, leaving the country more susceptible to attack from Taiwan's independent supporters and other countries like India, Japan, and Vietnam. It would end China's hopes of becoming a regional powerhouse for many years. And if the United States does end up losing? For the United States, conceding defeat could spell the end of its sway over the most prosperous part of the globe. Civil conflict, violence, and terror will break out in both nations due to a nuclear battle. Bloodied but not drained, the United States and China would emerge from these first battles, raising the prospect of a protracted, nasty conflict. The elimination of China's fleet, air force, and offensive weapon troops renders that country incapable of fresh attacks. On the other hand, Beijing's war goals may shift from simply conquering Taiwan to expelling the United States from the Western Pacific if the Pentagon continues to harm China and its military. Wars between superpowers tend to grow larger, noisier, and more challenging to resolve as they wear on. 4 potentially harmful patterns would emerge in a confrontation between the United States and China. To begin, protracted conflicts drain economies and societies even further as time passes. After the opening shots, both sides would scramble to restock on weaponry and, if required, reinforcements. This arms competition would put a severe strain on both countries' industrial bases, necessitate a refocusing of their domestic economies, and prompt calls for nationalistic rhetoric or the use of coercion to rally the populace for the arduous battle ahead. Remembering the nuclear disaster in Japan can help us grasp the global consequences of a nuclear strike. In a war today, if China and the United States unload on each other with nearly every tool at their disposal, as they almost surely would, a local war would quickly turn into a whole-of-society brawl spanning multiple regions. For instance, the United States detonated atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and firebombed most of Japan's main towns. They also enforced a blockade called Operation Starvation, which prevented Japan from importing 97% of its food. As a result of these factors, ending a war becomes highly challenging. Increases in military ambitions reduce and may even remove the room for negotiation. The longer a conflict lasts, the more hate and distrust grow. It's possible that allies would oppose a settlement if that would compromise their interests. The United States and China have nuclear weapons, so conflict would differ significantly from past hegemonic battles. At first glance, it may appear that MAD would prevent further conflict between the United States and China. Even though the logic of mobilization urges both parties to increase their war goals, they may settle for less than the total loss and humiliation of the adversary because they recognize that the decisive results and total victories that characterized the world wars are unachievable in the 21st century. However, nuclear weapons are not the solution to the problems that arise from fighting for an extended period. First, each party may believe they are safe from devastating reprisal if they use nuclear weapons. This could lead to an all-out exchange of conventional firepower. Scholars refer to this as the stability-instability problem, which describes a scenario in which uncritical reliance on nuclear deterrence leads to a conventional global conflict. Accidental escalation is the last possible path to nuclear conflict. Recognizing the danger of escalation, each party may seek to restrict the other's nuclear choices. China has ballistic missile subs, and the US could attempt to destroy them before they can conceal in the deep seas beyond the first island chain. However, suppose the United States also strikes China's land-based missiles and communication systems, which intermix conventional and nuclear forces. In that case, China may be forced into a use-it-or-lose-it scenario concerning its nuclear forces. There is no foolproof method of preparing for a protracted conflict whose path and characteristics still need to be discovered. And yet, there are 4 things the United States and its allies can do to be ready for whatever happens and ideally prevent the worst. It might launch hypersonic missiles equipped with conventional warheads at American cities. Defensive measures such as strengthening cyber defenses, building more bomb shelters, and increasing stores of food, water, and medicine are needed to prevent the success of any such pressure against Taiwan. The people of the United States and Taiwan will need to be mentally and emotionally ready for a lengthy and brutal war. To counter Beijing's pressure, it is necessary to promise painful reprisal. Therefore, controlling the career path should be considered a third goal. The United States and its partners can promise to transform a protracted conflict into an economic catastrophe for China by preparing to blockade Chinese trade and cut Beijing off from markets and technology. Nearly 75% of Beijing's gasoline and 45% of its natural gas are imported. Most of these travel through congested waterways, such as the Strait of Malacca, which is far from Chinese continental ports. The United States military could show its ability to seal off those choke points during peaceful military drills, thanks to its unmatched power projection powers and network of friends and partners. In addition, the United States can risk a generation's worth of Chinese military modernization by planning to sink Chinese naval boats anywhere in the Western Pacific and destroying Chinese military facilities in other areas. The dispute will become much more severe due to all of these measures. To counteract this impact, Washington must take the ultimate precaution of narrowing the scope of victory. When 2 superpowers go to war, Neither can expect to win by overthrowing the other or taking their central city. There will be a settlement reached through talks. The easiest solution would be for China to cease attacking Taiwan in exchange for a promise that Taiwan would not proclaim formal independence and that the United States would not support such a declaration. The United States could sweeten the argument by promising to keep its troops away from Taiwan and the Taiwan Strait. If America had intervened, a flourishing democracy in a critical location might still stand today. The two factions could go on living to fight another day.